So this is me. This is Yed speaking. So thank you. You are actually the one, our last guest or speaker, and so we would like to discuss with you the opportunity of, let's say, the data centers ecosystem landscape in Africa as a continent, maybe the regions. And you are the chairman of the Africa Data Center Association. Thank you very much for joining us. So we make it, and even despite this technical issue. So just before starting,
let's have another go.
So just in few words, the Africa Data Center and Cloud Days is an initiative actually that we started for. It's a second edition, and we are working to build a community around the digital infrastructure because we think there is a huge potential in Africa that we need to address, and there is also a need that we need to address to solve our economic issues, and to develop our digital economy, we need to work on our digital infrastructure, and there is no digital transformation or AI adoption when we don't have the right digital infrastructure. And with digital infrastructure, we can speak about data center, cloud, connectivity, to keep it just simple. But it's a bit complicated than that. What we did, just a few words, we organized in this session a hackathon with the architect students. We worked on the concept of the green data center. So we had quite good. So the winner, it was a data center in Kenya. The second one it was data center in Namibia, and the third one was a data center in Tunisia. So just like a summary. And this is actually last session. And what we want to discuss with you is, we heard from architects how challenging it is to build a data center in Africa. How is the market? So selling a data center in Africa is a bit challenging. Do we have the right experts, the salespeople? And but we are convinced that Africa needs data centers. And if we talk about the market, we talk about investment. And this is actually the topic that we want to discuss with you as a chairman of the Africa Data Center Association, but also as a CEO of a data center. So from the beginning, we would like to, if you can present yourself and to the audience, just few words about the audience. We have people from Holland, Germany, Portugal, Finland, Tunisia, and we have a lot of actors working in Africa. Unfortunately, we didn't make it to have people from other African countries. And this is actually one of the issues, because to travel from an African country to another, you need a visa, and a visa takes time, and it makes latency. Yeah. And this is, I think it belongs to each other. Yeah.
Yes.
So please present yourself, Mr. Ayotunde.
Hello, everybody, and I'm delighted to be here. As I've been described as the chairman of the African Data Center Association, which we started in 2018. So the association will be November this year, 7 years old, with just about over 50 members now in Africa. My day job is as Chief Executive Officer of Open Access Data Centers. Open Access Data Centers was started 5 years ago by a company called Avec, which was building out connectivity, terrestrial connectivity across Africa, built out the Easy cable on the eastern Pacific coast of Africa, and has been invested in many subsea cables connecting Africa to Europe. It also has point of presence in most of the data centers, large data centers in Africa, Telehouse in London, Global Switch, Marseille, and with setting up open access data centers, we bring together the wholesale open access connectivity that Wire has, and the data center business. I've been at open access data centers for 2.5 years now, and we've been building data centers across Africa. Just another piece of context, Avec is a consortium partner with Google's Equiano cable. So we have a couple of fiber pairs on that. It's also a consortium partner with Meta, the True Africa cable on the West Atlantic coast and also on the East Pacific coast of Africa, connecting right back down to Europe. So in the last sort of 5 years, we've established a company, got the funding to build out, and we've done quite a lot of building and expansion in the last 2.5, 3 years. We have this core to edge strategy. So the core data centers is 2 megawatts, 5 megawatts, build out to 10 large data centers. And then the edge data centers tend to be smaller, medium, sort of 30 racks, 50 racks type of size, maybe even 15 racks. And the medium sized ones tend to be, say, about 150 racks, or we can build out to around 300 racks, for instance. So we have a core data center in Durban, which is where the Two Africa cable lands into South Africa. We have a core data center. Durban is building out now about 1 megawatt out to trajectory of 8 megawatts. Joburg is building out at about 2 megawatts now. We have 2 other core data centers in Cape Town. Then we have a large data center in Lagos, in Nigeria, which is where the Equiano cable lands into Nigeria. And that's building out quite rapidly now, about 2 megawatts critical IT load. And we're expanding that to 24 megawatts in Lagos. And we're looking at other edge data centers across the country. And in Democratic Republic of Congo, we have a core data center there, which has transformed the digital environment in Kinshasa. Kinshasa has 15 million people. It's the first data center, proper data center in Kinshasa, carrier neutral data center, pulling in the internet exchange. Every single location we build out a vibrant interconnect ecosystem, so it becomes the interconnect ecosystem in the location. Before joining OADC, I used to be the chief executive officer for RAC Center, which I ran for 8 years. I built that out in Lagos, in Nigeria. And prior to that, I was group CIO for Access Bank, which was the Nigerian bank then, expanding across Africa. I found that my career before coming into data centers has been helpful because it was really with RAC Center that I got into data centers, actually Access Bank. Because my entire career has been, I was born in Nigeria, Nigerian dad, British born, but I went to university in Wales, and I was over there internationally based in the UK for about 30 years before I took the role back in Africa. And I said, why would you build a data center? I got back to Africa. I couldn't find any co-location place we would for the bank anywhere, apart from even outside South Africa. But even then, it was still fledgling in South Africa. So we built one. We built it to high standard, tier 3 standards. And that set the bar for the data center tier certifications in Africa. It was the first one to be, it wasn't certified, but one first banking data center to be built to tier 3. Was when I took on the role at RAC Center. We then built the first certified, construct certified data center in Africa. And things have developed since then. And in building out the community in Africa. And in 2018, I'll just give you an example of how Africa has moved on in the world in attention for data centers. If you go to Data Cloud in Monaco, 2017, they had an Africa section and about 10 people attended. And we said, why don't we set up a data center association in Africa? That's what we did. Paul Francois Cartier, who worked for Schneider at the time, took on the task. And he's now the CEO, MD of Africa Data Center Association. And then we went on and launched it in November 2018 at what was then Data Cloud Africa. Now, Data Cloud Monaco now had around about 30 or 40 people attending the Africa section in 2018. By the time we got to 2019, it was the main room. So there's been a significantly more interest in discussing and Africa sections now are typical in most of the international data center or connectivity, digital infrastructure sections. So that's sort of my background and sort of what I've been doing here. We are building as open access data centers across Africa. We're still expanding. We've been doing quite a lot. So I understand that also the topic is it the right time to build a data center in Africa? I also understand you've had discussions around the challenges of building a data center. And there are challenges, there are opportunities in many ways. So first of all, the area of expertise tends to be quite sort of localized. We've got expertise building up around South Africa. They've built up a great supply chain, value chain there for data centers. They have huge, large data centers like Terraco in South Africa, Africa data centers, for instance, and so on. As you probably have discussed, just South Africa has about 50% of the entire data center installation in Africa. But the other countries have been, developing as well and catching up. But as they do, other data centers open up in South Africa. Lagos in Nigeria is building out as a significant data center location. If you look at the analysis, it tends to be South Africa, Lagos, Nigeria, Cairo, Egypt. You have Morocco, Kenya, and those are the sort of locations where we're seeing the data centers, the post-data center locations. And they have been increasing in having the right value chain, supply chain for data center expertise and also the build capability. It's a challenge to build data centers. You have to get a planning, you have to get a kind of right location. Yeah, it has to have the right kind of connectivity. You have access to energy, so there's a lot to have to consider. And why would I say that? Yes, it's the right time to build in Africa. It's because the digital infrastructure is just so underserved in Africa. 1.5 billion, some say 1.4, 1.5 keeps growing, say 1.5 billion in Africa. The amount of installed capacity, that 50% of that is in South Africa, is only 30% of what London has. And if you look at metropolitan London, the population of metropolitan London is 15 million people. 1.5 billion people in Africa has only the capacity of 15 million. The next one is if you look at Netherlands. Netherlands metropolitan Netherlands and Amsterdam population is about 5 million. Look at the metropolitan area. And the 1.5 billion people only have 50% of what's in Amsterdam. London is about twice installed capacity into Amsterdam. You stay with Frankfurt, so on. So just from the headline, there's a problem, right? There's an opportunity. So building tends to, you can also build the scales of how do you deliver in Africa. You have issues. It's a great opportunity for innovation. I've always found. I've been back here now for 16 years. It's always the challenges from many ways. Getting the skill sets, building the right quality, and getting, if you're not going to fly everybody in from anywhere. Building in DR Congo, Kinshasa was a challenge. We had most skills coming in from Nigeria, from South Africa. But we have a built core skill set. Actually, we have very, very bright young people in Africa. And I say it's the leadership context. You can bring them up and train them up, and the performance can be significant, actually. When I was at Rack Center, my chief engineer then won the Global Data Center Manager of the Year at Data Center Dynamics in London 7 years ago. So those are the kind of skills we can develop. So that's one part of the challenges. I've talked about one part of the opportunity in underserved. we only have 1% of global data center infrastructure in Africa. We have 18% of world population. We have 4% of world GDP, and we're 18% of world population. I call that the prosperity gap. And then you have the digital gap, 1% of data centers and 4% of GDP. Okay. If you look at fiber installations in Africa, we only have about 0.02% or something like that of fiber. And we all know that if you're going to have direct, strong connectivity, you need this fiber backbone, terrestrial fiber backbone, as well as subsea. But the other side of it actually is Africa is quite well served with subsea capacity. If you look at on the West Coast, what we have with wax, main one cable, ACE cable. Now, the Aquino cable has come in with about 20 terabits capacity, which is about over twice the total amount that is on the west coast of Africa, for instance. When 2Africa comes in, that should go live in the next 6 months or so. It will bring 180 terabytes of capacity into the continent, back out into Europe. Okay, that's a huge amount of increase. And you have 2Africa on the east coast, and the upgrades going on with the capacity on the east coast. And Google has just announced a new cable that in the last week. Meta has just announced a new cable in the last week that's now going to traverse linking points connecting across Asia, connecting into Africa and out into South America and out to America. So some of those things are coming together now, but it's still underserved. So if you look at those figures, it shows that we need to have data centers. But the interesting perspective also is this. Access to cloud has typically been connecting to Europe and the US with issues around sovereign data and also issues around latency and so on. So there is a reason why you bring cloud into Africa. There's another reason why surely it must make sense to come into Africa. The mobile networks have shown that you can be highly profitable on the continent if you get your business model right. Africa is what I call the sachet economy, right? People don't buy, say, a liter of milk. They'll buy little sachets to use today. Most people, we will buy a liter of milk or whatever, right? It's a different, 99% of the continent is a different demographic. They do well, but they earn today to spend for tomorrow. And tomorrow they earn tomorrow for the day after. So they tend to buy in small sachets. I call it sachet economy. So the only way the mobile networks were successful, of course, once they got the infrastructure out there, but also you can buy your airtime as you go. People pay for the data they need for just the next 4 hours. And then they buy a bit more data, but the repurchase process is made to be seamless and easy. The only other example in technology of access to pay-as-you-go ERP for market people or whoever else will do their businesses online with TikTok, with WhatsApp. The commerce across Africa with these applications is amazing. But they'll just purchase what they need today to do that business today, to earn the money today, to spend tomorrow. Cloud is therefore, with all those apps, what is going to do the sachet economy for Africa. So all of these now, when I look at it, makes sense. It's the right time to build in Africa, right? Sure. Okay. However, we've talked about the challenges of build, but you also have to build the right quality architecture of data center to attract the cloud and hyperscale players. We have lots of, if you look at the maps of edge locations in Africa, there are lots of edge locations for CDNs, for lower scale edge optimization for cloud, Amazon Web Services have Lagos, you have Microsoft, Oracle, and in South Africa, Google in South Africa. You have Google edge points across Africa, so in East Africa, especially Egypt and Oracle. Tunisia is actually starting to really develop as an interesting sort of DC scale location. There's something that also gets in the way of data centers being successful, and why you might wonder why they don't build out in certain locations. If you don't have a well-regulated telecoms infrastructure, connectivity infrastructure environment that is open, that breeds competition, that enables investment, the data center industry tends to just be flat. Look at Ethiopia. Look at Cameroon. Now look at the other side of the coin. Look at South Africa, how it's developing. Look at Nigeria, how it's developing out. And Morocco has been changing its own approach to telecoms openness, regulation, competitiveness is growing. Same thing around, so Kenya. This is why Egypt hasn't really taken off, because it's actually grown despite those issues. But imagine if they had a much more open telecoms environment. So there are some constraints that will stop. You see us not build out kind of scale that we see in South Africa, for instance, or elsewhere. I think you'll see in the next 4 years, Lagos build out towards the trajectory towards South Africa, because the dynamics fundamentals are quite good. And it has a country population of 420 million. The local population is 23, 24 million. It's like a city state. It's like the fifth largest economy in Africa. Kenya will grow. We've got a few hyperscale facilities, one in IX Africa, really. The others are mid-scale good edge locations, the enterprise data centers, for instance. The challenge I've seen over the last 10 years is to change the mindset of enterprises instead of building data centers to co-locate. If you're not a data center company, it doesn't make sense to do that. And I also say to telco companies that if you build a data center and you're a telco company, not neutral, there's a constraint there. But why put your capital in building some co-location data center when you could put that capital to drive and build out your network in what is a challenging place in Africa? Those mindset has been slow to change, but it's now starting to happen. And the companies tend to shift their enterprises when they have to do a refresh. But I also make sure I educate the board, because if you have to do a refresh and the IT goes to the board to ask for a $2 million approval, the board members are educated enough to say, why did you not go to speak to Mr. Coker, all of these co-location providers? And they wonder, what's going on? Because we spent time to shift the normal thinking. What we also therefore find, and it's a tough one for data center operators, for investors, is look, you have an anchor client. Great to have an anchor client to build a data center. But your anchor client takes 30% of your data center, so you have to sell 70%. It takes time to build a brand and to turn it around for the trust into the brand, so you get what you now start to have on populated opportunity. The whole process of selling data center space is not easy, especially when you have competition as well. You have to change the mindsets of enterprises. Then they go through that justification process. Then they think it's going to be 3 months. You've planned for 3 months for that space to be taken down, then it becomes 6 months. And investors always get very, very nervous when you have that kind of situation. And when I speak to salespeople, I noticed in the introduction, they say, do we have the right type of salespeople? The sales cycle is very, very complicated, right from the CEO setting the clear way for the salespeople, getting engaged with technical people, and so on, to turn around. And that's what happens in enterprises. Also, you need to build your ecosystem as a neutral player. And you need to relate to all of the global players if you're going to be the location for the CDNs who bring good capacity. So that means you have to invest in showing up internationally. ITW US, Capacity Middle East, Data Cloud Europe. We're now having Africa ones. They come into the Africa environment now as they're building out. They then get to understand your competencies, and they'll bring the workload into the data centers. So the sales cycle is a huge challenge. But in time, once you strengthen the brand, you start to get a lot of unforecasted opportunity because you're part of the overall architecture. But for us to have cloud scale coming to Africa, we have to have the right kind of data center or the right kind of scale. So the megawatts come in of hyperscale data, 10 megawatts, 15, 20 megawatts, right? But to build 1 megawatt of data center is typically $10 million. It could be a bit less when you have the right value chain. And you can do $8 million in Africa, by the way. A lot has changed. Typically, it used to be 5, 7, 8 years ago, around about $15 million level. A clean environment where you're just starting, you could actually be doing around about 18 million. And that's before you then have to carry the cost of operations before you fill in the data center to pay to cover your base cost and get a bit positive, right? That's some sort of significant challenges. So with 10 megawatt data center, you have to convince someone to give you 100 million. Okay, you build it in stages. It's not just in one go. You have to get people to give you $100 million, right? So that in itself sort of brings the challenges. And then the other one is to work with regulators. Immediately, sometimes regulators think, we've now got this business, $100 million of investment, then what's the one of money? They don't realize it's actually $100 million of investment. It's not $100 million of revenues. You can only tax revenues, right? And I always say to people, why choke the goose that will lay the golden egg before it lays you one golden egg? Because then you'll never get a golden egg. So there's a lot of education to do with these regulators. And I also say, who would regulate the data center or supervise it? You see, in some countries, some telcos will say, we will come in to regulate the data center. But you're supposed to regulate the telco industry. The data center is a data center. Regulate the telcos. They only exist in a carrier-neutral data center. The central banks will regulate the banks who are in data centers. The oil and gas regulators will regulate oil and gas who come in. The pharmaceuticals will regulate them who come into data centers. They could probably say, because it's very critical infrastructure, you have to make sure it's a minimum level of data center design, certification, so on. So there isn't a reason for a telco company to come and regulate the data center unless it's a carrier data center and they're regulating the carrier. You see what I mean? Okay. So we always have to get that education in place. But supervision is fine. As part of IT infrastructure, a country has a supervising body to bring in cloud developments. You talked about, you had a hackathon here, so on. So there's a whole range as leaders in this business across Africa that we need to think about. Okay. So it's the right time to build, but you have to be careful about what you build. It's not a quick journey. It can take you 3 to 4 years. If you have a good, well-known leader in building the data center, and we've seen some in Africa with Ike's Arthur's background from interaction. You have Ranjis with Ikolo, his background, also from interaction and building out in different locations in Africa. We have, so where the individuals are now, it helps accelerate the process, okay, to get the recognition, to get the scaling. But it's still a significant challenge to build, to launch, to start to build the ecosystem, to build it out. But when you do it, it can be significant upside, indeed. The other thing that's happening is you have to, and this is very much around the world, it's quite clear now that the successful data center providers are able to bring connectivity that's open together. And you see Equinix has been pushing and doing some stuff like that, which is why we have this converged open digital infrastructure across Africa that we do. We bring connectivity with open access DC. That is now showing to be a very, very unique proposition. Okay. And the connectivity side will get regulated by the connectivity regulators. It's okay. So data centers supervised by the different supervisory bodies in the different countries. The third one is energy. you have to have access to the right kind of price of energy, and even more preferably right now, sustainable energy. If you bring those three things together very well in an environment where you have the local consumptive capability, right, then it's a recipe for success. So is it the right time to build in Africa? Certainly, yes. Also, I'm saying it depends on a few other things, where you build, the environment. So site selection is very important. But what we do is we build the edge data centers as well. We can land in a place and efficiently put, say, 100 rack to 150 rack data center there, and leverage the capabilities we had around open connectivity to make it feasible at the first entry point to unlock the markets. You see what I mean? So the environments are the tier ones are those countries I talked about, South Africa, Lagos, in Nigeria, Nairobi, so in the order of the survey by done, Egypt, Morocco, Nairobi. Then you have the tier twos, where you have to put in data centers and interconnect data centers, plus the IXs, the internet exchanges are very, very key in building the peering ecosystems. Make sure they're very, very well advertised on peering DB. Takes time to do that. Then you start to really get the uptake that you require. And then you can now build the hyperscale megawatts of data centers. The other thing as key to scale is this. People keep thinking that we'll have sovereign data rules so that we localize the data in the country. So you have to build all of the data center in the country. South Africa, Nigeria, Egypt, say Tunisia, or if you're a big enough country, you could say push that, okay? But you'll only push it up to a point, right? Because you have a global information system going on right now in data and management system. So data classification is the next level of what you're finding with sovereign data now, to classify what is key and what is regional and what you can allow to be global. The sensible regulators are now starting to think that way. Okay. So you build this scale anyway. But what I've been pushing over the last 3 years or so with the Africa Data Centers Association, we also work with Smart Africa, with what they've been doing with digitizing Africa, is to say we must have a Pan-Africa data sovereignty framework, okay, at the Africa Union level that is subscribed to by the majority. We can't wait till everybody is, as long as you get critical mass and majority, right? You tip the needle. What it means is that I use the example of Togo, which is just down the road from where I am located in Lagos. You can't put more than 150 racks there because the country itself is not big enough. But for the region, if we have a common data sovereignty data framework, I'll put 10 megawatts in there because I know I can serve Nigeria, I can serve Ghana, and so on. Then regionally, you start, because the energy is free, cheap. Let's say if the energy is cheap, let's say it's sustainable, and I have great connectivity, suddenly I can go to a small country and I can host for the rest of. But it's okay because it helps the small countries. There's a thing called latency, and Africa is so huge in its size that the practicalities of it is that people will be encouraged to create the right operating environments for data centers so they can bring huge investment because they can serve other countries. But Africa's size is so huge, latency comes into play because you can't just serve the whole of Africa from Rwanda if they created the right situation, or serve the whole of Africa from Nairobi. It won't work. So what it means, it now creates so many other countries where it makes sense for data center investment to go in. And once we do that, and you start to also have the investment in connectivity, and we start to unlock the areas of energy in Africa that is cheap and sustainable, then Africa will take off. So to answer that question, it's the right time to invest in Africa if you take into account all of these things, but there's still many, many things that are still ongoing. Special groups, the Data Center Association. For what it's worth, I'm on the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry pushing, say, how we need to invest in minutes and digital infrastructure and so on. Or we collectively should do this across the continent, right? So we create the awareness and create the right environment for build. And I'll just leave you finally with one thought. Remember I talked about the prosperity gap, 18% of global population, 4%. In fact, sadly, the population percentage is going up, but the GDP percentage is going down, right? It's very sad. We cannot close the prosperity gap without closing the digital gap. But the investment in closing the digital gap is huge, and the impact is huge. Why? For every 10% of broadband penetration we have, if you turn that into broadband adoption, you can, previously they said it's 10% broadband penetration, you get 0.5% increase in GDP, right? And that's meaningful broadband. Okay. In many ways, fiber is part of it, radio is part of it, and so on. Meaningful broadband. Okay. For every $10 you put into a data center investment, you get about $50 return in impact into the economy, right? The local economy. So it's because of direct impact. You're building the buildings, you hire expensive architects to do it. You pay people in a local authority to give you a local planning. You do all of these things, right? You have to pilot, you have to do the building, you have to buy the M&E. Some of the M&E therefore starts industries locally. Once you've built the data center, you then start to operate it. You have security people. A lot of that is outsourced. And it hits the community. And then you start to build the expansion. So you have the direct effects and the induced effects, right? So imagine if you built a 10 megawatt data center that would have good uptake. It will have good uptake when you have all these things, right? As I've discussed, right? So that means you're spending 100 million. That means if everything adds up together, and let's just assume it's even the lower side of 20, not 30 times direct and induced effect. That means you've had $2 billion impact, plus the connectivity and the broadband that you put in. Now, I said it's not just broadband penetration, it's broadband adoption. To get broadband adoption, therefore, you need endpoint devices as the phones, the cheaper, not feature phones anymore. 10 years, 8 years ago, the import of cheap feature phone phones into Africa was less than smartphones for the first time, and it's been growing, right? Penetration of 4G under 5G is been growing. If you look at the ITU assessment and GSMA assessments, right? But you then invest in the consumptive side, okay? That's where you get your 2.5 GDP from, plus the data center coming in, right? Plus the investments that you now need in the energy systems to power this up. So you now see the impact it could have on Africa. The World Bank and some of these bodies have been looking at how you intelligently drive those investments in Africa. So it's quite affirmative. If we get it right, the impact on the world is significant. I'm going to speaking from a data center person now to the board, but it is what it is, right? Because we now develop a consumptive Africa that has natural resources, that uses energy to generate the data centers, and then also is able to earn a lot more to buy goods from the rest of the world and export materials from here out into the rest of the world, right? That is how we'll close the prosperity gap, in my view. And it's a long play. So I'll finish by saying, yes, it's the right time to invest in Africa, but you have to do it taking into account all of those things. I've talked about. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Coker. Thank you for the valuable insights. So I have some questions, and because so you were speaking about unlocking, let's say, the markets, and you were speaking about Lagos, Morocco, and you were speaking about that the IT, the telcos, they should get a bit relaxed or flexible in terms of or liberal telco regulation. So what do you mean? Because let me just if we take the case of Tunisia, for example, or the first data center has been built in 2009, for example, and then in 2014, I think you have already one of our data center is member of the association. But as a business itself, despite the number of cables that are crossing Tunisia and the meters between Tunisia and Italy, it's very it's a very important geographic place. But these two data centers, they are not doing well in revenues and when there is a second, like a third or fourth, except the telcos, because they can afford it. When they see these two, the experience, so they're not very motivated to build like a data center. And the same thing, like a very small, 12 million population country, Tunisia, and huge, maybe potential close to Europe latency, etc., summer and sun and whatever. But these two, the co-location business and the data center sales operations are something that is mastered, but the sales, it's not something that is mastered, and some data centers tends to sell or to launch like hosting company and cloud brands, so they are competing with their customers directly. So actually what we are looking for is what can unlock or unleash this potential, like from your perspective, because you have an high overview.
Okay, good question. And you see that in various places. One challenge in one part of it is to change the mindset of enterprises, right? You find a data center company would have, say, three types of competitors, I think I'll say. One is your other data center company down the road, because they start to fight for the same enterprise, right? Two is the telco company as building data centers that also wants to sell some of that as colo, because historically they work at it. Number three is the enterprises, and convincing them that it is more efficient to collocate than to build a data center. It's a long haul. I went through it here with building a Black Center. We had now one has its own complementary other data center in the area in Lagos. So the competitive overlap was not sort of huge, but is there. But actually, it meant that you could have a primary in one place and disaster recovery elsewhere, or vice versa. So it's not always a bad thing to have to. But I realized that you have to be much more cost efficient than the enterprise building its own data center. There has to be a significant amount of education going on. The other thing is, and that's why I talked about right sizing in certain locations, right? And building out in stages. Getting the EBITDA level right is tricky. Energy and stock tends to be the key, the biggest part of the costs. But you have to figure out how the aggregation of energy has to be more efficient than anybody else building an enterprise data center. You can't go to regulators to say, force people to collocate. But one thing at the time we did in Nigeria then was to convince the central bank that the data center, if the data center is down, the bank is down. If the bank goes down, then the amount of money at risk immediately is significant. people will start to withdraw cash from lots of different branches while they bring in the manual, processes, while you bring back your IT systems. It's systemically damaging and everything. So, yeah, true. So every bank has to have at least one tier 3 certified, either Uptime Institute tier 3 certified data center or TIA, but it has to be a minimum level of standard. That raised the game. That means that a bank would have to find the capital to build at least one of its data centers, primary or secondary, to be tier 3. Okay. That then got the CEOs thinking, well, we can't afford this. Let's start to collocate. And once you get some of the key banks collocate, others do, and some of the enterprises will do as well. And it's a tough business to run because you have to have 100, then forget 99.982 Uptime Institute or 90 something or whatever. You have to be up 100% uptime. It's damaging if you're less than 100% uptime, right? So there's systemic things that means that it convinces the enterprises to therefore outsource, and it becomes more efficient for them to do that. It's the practicalities of it. So it's a very competitive thing to run. The other thing also is that you have to build ecosystem. You have to, for instance, in Kinshasa, the first data center to be live in Kinshasa, we had it tier 3 certified. We had PCI DSS certification. It's now ISO 27001 certified and 22301 certified. Baseline. And it's only been live for about 5 months, right? You have to sell the uptake a long time for coming, okay? And right size it. It's in itself, it's a challenge to build us these at the speed we want in Kinshasa, but it's building good momentum. And if you have the ecosystem and the interconnect ecosystems, like we've done already in Lagos, we're building out the huge ecosystems here, and we're doing the same thing in South Africa. Those are recipes of what you have to put together to make it successful. And that's why I say it's not easy, and it's a long game. And getting the aggregated costs down so it's more efficient to do that is very, very important indeed in markets where you have a data center operating. The converse of it is that for you to get that 100% uptime, the kind of people you require are also not cheap. So cybersecurity is also enterprises can build.
And the type of the human resources or the human the human resources, or the expert. Now with the boom boosted by the AI, we see that a lot of tech companies focusing on their homeland, and then where the biggest investments amounts are coming.
I didn't hear the earlier side of what you were saying.
I was speaking about the expert. Yeah, the expert, the price of the expert, and at the same time, now that we are seeing this data center boom in Western countries, North America and Europe, and the huge investments coming to prepare the AI infrastructure. So it's like there is like a over absorbing all the expertise in the markets, because at the end, the IT job market is one global job market, and this makes things a bit harder.
Yes, and that's the equation that we have to work out. Okay, there's this boom going on. There's been more in just this year in the US. There's been gigawatts of data centers, which are about 10 times of what exists of all time in Africa in just 1 year. And so the equation doesn't look balanced somehow. But you have to have the global ecosystems, the interconnect ecosystems, and the pairing, be very visible and pairing and become an edge to what's happening elsewhere. There's some, and it's a quest. You have to have those ecosystems, and you have to build relationships with the people that bring your content distribution networks into the country. Right? The other thing is this: I keep talking about with what's happened in Europe. they had the issue with energy consumptions, and they weren't giving data centers planning permission. So in Europe now, it's about 2 years behind. They've suddenly woken up and realized that, oh dear, we need to these things. We need to make sure that we can host AI systems and stuff and so on. So where do you put those things? It has to go somewhere. That's why you have to have the right kind of architecture of data center, at least to have the edge locations, right? I call it capacity substitution. And that is where places like Morocco, you know, closer to, Tunisia, closer to Europe, where they don't have the capacity and so on, to pull some of that compute capacity into Africa and then deliver that back into Europe. So you have that capacity substitution, or at least for the capacity that's required in Africa. But no one's going to come and capacity substitute in a place they don't know that doesn't have the right ecosystems. So you have to get out there to really engage, but also build the right ecosystems. Then it becomes an attractive location for an edge data center.
Yeah. Thank you. Do we have a question here in the audience? Yeah. No question. So, Tunde, do you want to add something? So thank you. It was actually, thank you very much, because, we needed this, we needed insights from Africa. So as said, we discussed the challenges in DR and, running things and architecture challenges in Africa, but running data centers and, you also speaking about success recipes and that is indeed, because as said, so macroeconomically is a good idea. It's a very good idea, but microeconomically, how we get it done, it's not an easy topic, and you need to join different expertise and you need to master like something in a building and to be open up to all the world, because it's a whole ecosystem. So thank you very much. So thank you that it works, because we started at 12, but thank you for your flexibility, and it was our last intervention, but very important. I hope that next year, so you will join us, hopefully, and be present here. And maybe we need like a direct flights between African countries, and maybe direct cables between African countries, and not only on the because this is the roads, they may be
I think to get to
closer.
Tunisia, I have to fly to Paris and then come back.
Actually, just north. In Tunisia, with the A1 highway is actually designed to bind Tunis to Johannesburg. Actually, the A1 should go from Tunis and reach South Africa. And actually, one fiber cable should be also built there. Thank you, Tunde. Thank you very much, and hope to see you soon in one of the events. And thank you. Thank you.
Yes, hope awesome. So thank you. Appreciate it. All the best. Have a nice evening.
You too. Bye. Okay. Now we have some summary, a small summary, a video summary that we like to show you, and after that we will be closing the second edition of Africa Data Center and Cloud Days. I'm really happy that we made it. And small summary. Final thing before you go, thank you very much for everyone. Really, thank you. Thank you to the participants. Thank you to the sponsors, and thank you to the organization guys. Thank you. No, thank you for my memory. Yeah, so I forgot a lot. So thank you very much, and I hope to see you next year here. Yeah. So I want to call the organization team here on the stage to yeah, Aziz, right, Umayma, Emna, Aisha, and the troublemaker.